Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into a really paradigm-shifting concept from the author Steve Chandler. We're going to take a hard look at the media we consume every single day and how it literally dictates our mental reality. I mean, if you've ever felt completely drained, overwhelmed, or just unusually cynical after catching up on the daily headlines, let me tell you, you are absolutely not alone. From an evolutionary standpoint, our brains are actually hardwired for survival, so they naturally cling to negative information as a sort of protective measure to keep us safe from perceived threats. But Chandler offers this fascinating lens through which to view how modern media totally exploits that ancient wiring. And more importantly, he hands us a really powerful toolkit to take back control of our minds. So let's get right into it and start unpacking how we can rethink the information we absorb. Now, I want to start with a bit of a provocative question. Are you an unknowing member of a persuasive hypnotic cult? When we hear the word cult, right, we usually picture remote compounds, strange robes, maybe some chanting, but Chandler introduces a very different, much more hidden type of cult. He suggests that if you're a regular consumer of major news programs, you actually already belong to a highly persuasive, deeply cynical, and incredibly hypnotic cult. It's this cult of pessimism. It constantly draws your attention to the absolute worst aspects of humanity, and it keeps you stuck in this passive state of anxiety. And, just like any cult member, if you want to break free, you need to be actively deprogrammed. To figure out how to deprogram ourselves, we first need to understand the machinery we're working with here. Chandler uses this brilliant foundational metaphor. He calls the human mind a biocomputer. Just think about it for a second. A regular computer operates entirely based on the code and the data you input into it, right? If you feed it a virus, the system crashes. But if you feed it efficient, clean code, it runs beautifully. Well, your mind functions as this highly programmable entity in the exact same way. It doesn't inherently distinguish between a helpful truth and a destructive, fear-inducing narrative. It simply processes whatever you give it. And what that means is you have to be the programmer. You have to actively filter out the negative viruses, all that daily doom and gloom, and intentionally input positive, constructive code instead. All right, Section 1, the hypnotic news cult. Let's look at how this media actually grips us. Okay, let's dive into this. To understand this script, we need to explore the actual mechanics of our daily media habits. Like, how does this programming actually happen, and why is it so incredibly effective at capturing our attention day in and day out? The core problem is brilliantly illustrated right here. The news is not the news. It is the bad news. It is deliberate shock. When we sit down on the couch to watch an evening broadcast, or when we're endlessly scrolling through our feeds, we tell ourselves we're just getting informed, right? We genuinely think we're getting an objective summary of the day's events. But Chandler forcibly points out that this is a total illusion. The broadcast is heavily curated. It's engineered specifically for deliberate shock and emotional reaction. Why? Well, because shock is what keeps you watching. The real danger here is that the more you accept this concentrated, nonstop stream of negativity as just the news, the more you start to believe that, well, that's just the way the world is. You start mistaking a curated highlight reel of global tragedies for an accurate representation of everyday life. And blindly accepting that only breeds deep fear and crippling cynicism. Moving on to Section 2, the media's crime bias and how it creates a totally distorted worldview. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast it highlights. Let's examine exactly what kind of sensational bad news the media actually chooses to spotlight. Chandler points us to this absolutely captivating essay by a San Francisco writer and musician named Gary Lachman. Lachman studied what he called world rejection in criminal romantics, and he noticed this massive, glaring imbalance in our cultural storytelling. On one hand, you have the Ted Bundys of the world, the violent criminals, the shocking scandals, the really dramatic destructions of life. These figures get endless television coverage, they get multi-part true crime documentaries, and minute-by-minute updates. Their darkness is literally romanticized by the sheer volume of attention it gets. But then, on the other side, you have thousands and thousands of self-actualizers. These are everyday people just working away at self-transformation. They're creating art, building supportive communities, making medical breakthroughs, and steadily, quietly improving the world. Their work is quiet, it's anonymous, and consequently, it is almost entirely ignored by the mainstream media. So our biocomputer is fed this constant, overwhelming diet of the former and is completely starved of the latter. But here is the really profound reassurance that Lachman gives us in his essay. He says it's their influence, not that of the Ted Bundys, that will shape the face of the coming century. Despite the endless airtime given to criminals and sensational scandals, the actual trajectory of human progress is driven by those quiet, Anonymous self-actualizers. The loud, destructive events are just that. They're loud. They're flashes in the pan. True power and lasting evolutionary change come from the thousands of individuals committed to quiet self-improvement and steadfast self-transformation. And it is absolutely crucial that we repeatedly remind our biocomputers of this fact.
So that brings us to section 3, deprogramming your mind and honestly, taking back control.
Now that we've identified the hypnotic programming of the news cult, it's time to shift our focus toward the solution. Here is your vital toolkit for taking back your biocomputer. This is a specific deprogramming procedure outlined by Chandler. Step 1. Alter how you listen to electronic gossip, shock TV, and traditional news. You can no longer afford to be a passive listener. You have to become an active, highly critical filter. Step 2. Consciously program out all the negative, cynical, and skeptical thoughts that you usually allow to flow into your mind completely unchecked when you hear about the latest disaster. You literally have to catch those thoughts at the door and deny them entry. Step 3. Factor out the effect. Chandler recognizes that, look, we don't always have the opportunity to completely avoid media reports of crime and scandal. I mean, they're playing in waiting rooms, at airports, all over our online spaces. So the key is to listen in a way that always factors out the negative emotional effect that the content is specifically designed to have on you.
And you know what? We actually already have the skills to do this. Think about passing the tabloids in the grocery store checkout line. You look over and see a headline screaming, "Aliens are living in the White House," or some other absurd, shocking piece of gossip. Do you panic? Do you start making emergency plans or lose sleep over it? Of course not. No way. You smile, you recognize it for the sensational nonsense that it is, and you easily factor it out. Chandler's really powerful advice here is that we need to take that exact same attitude, that same healthy, dismissive mental filter, and apply it to what passes as serious media. When the news tries to deliberately shock you with negativity, just smile and factor out the effect exactly like you would with a supermarket tabloid. You have to protect your biocomputer from the virus.
Let's move to section 4, make your own news, and see how this all builds together. Once you've successfully learned to filter out the negativity of today's media, what do you actually replace it with? This is for sure the most empowering and uplifting phase of this explainer. Ask yourself this critical question: how do we actually change a world filled with crime, apathy, and things we desperately wish were different? Do we change it by sitting quietly in front of a screen and worrying about it? Let that sink in for a second. The answer is a resounding no. Fretting about crime and watching endless coverage of societal decay does absolutely nothing to improve the world. Passive worrying and passive media consumption are completely futile exercises. They literally only serve to drain your personal energy and keep you totally paralyzed. Instead of just sitting there fretting, Chandler points us to the ultimate motivational answer, famously articulated by Mahatma Gandhi: you must be the change you wish to see. If you want less apathy in the world, you can't just complain about apathy while watching the evening news. You have to become deeply, personally engaged yourself. If you want a world with less crime and more self-actualization, you have to do the quiet, diligent work of self-transformation. True, lasting change requires proactive, individual action. You simply cannot outsource your worldview or your impact to a television broadcast. It just doesn't work that way. So the crucial point really comes down to these final directives. You have to take it a step further than just filtering out the bad. Make your own news. Be your own breaking story. Stop looking to external media sources to tell you what's happening in the world. And definitely stop letting them tell you what is supposedly happening in your own life or what you should be afraid of today. Focus entirely on your own self-actualization. You have the ultimate power to program your biocomputer with your own goals, your own tangible progress, and your own positive actions. Be what's happening. Which leaves us with this final thought for you to carry forward. Now that you hold the keys to deprogram your mind and filter out that hypnotic news cult, the blank screen of your biocomputer is just sitting there, waiting for your input. Stop watching the world happen on a screen and start making it happen in your real life. So what will your breaking story be today? Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope you leave today feeling fully empowered to take action and write your very own headlines.